The walls of York. Each stone must have its story, a story from the thousands of years of lives spent within these walls. And for so many, that story is never-ending, their spirits set to wander after death. York Minster, over 250 years in construction, dedicated in 1472. 10 generations of men worked over the stone of the building. Dean Gale surrendered his care of the minster when he died in 1702, but he can still appear in a pew listening to others' sermons. A naval officer approached a young lady visiting the minster in the 1820s. He had a message from the afterlife. The lady was his sister, and he was appearing at the very hour of his death, far away at sea. In the late 1960s, a woman visited the restoration work. A stonemason called her to admire the pieces he had carved, then, promptly, vanished. Millions of visitors are attracted to York each year. How sensitive can such crowds be to the lives that passed before them? In Stonegate's Old Star Inn, dogs snarl at invisible intruders, and 2 spectral cats can be seen darting across its rooms. When this building was the home of a Victorian doctor, a dinner party saw the doctor's 6-year-old daughter sent out of the way to her attic bedroom. She crept out to the landing to listen to the party 3 floors below. As she leaned over the banister, her hands slipped and her little body fell. Her footsteps can still be heard, they say, climbing each of those stairs back to her room. The Red Devil was the totem of the Printers Guild, the print shops clacking down Coffee Yard. These narrow ways are as choked with memories as anywhere else in York. Lund's Court, also known as Mad Alice Lane. The lane couldn't contain Mad Alice Smith, hanged for her madness at York Castle in 1825. The woman died. The madness, perhaps, lingers. Bedden Path follows the original medieval street through the newly restored Bedden. Formerly home of the Minster's Vicars Choral, this area was described by a writer in 1855 as now the receptacle of poverty and wretchedness, the poorest of the Irish emigrants being its chiefest inhabitants. There's a little sign now of the 19th century slums, or the York Industrial Ragged School where children died of abuse and neglect. The children's laughter, though, is still heard, ringing through the Bedden archway. Not that you needed to laugh your head off in York. Thomas Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, was sent to the scaffold on York's pavement in 1572. A Catholic who sided with Mary Queen of Scots, his head spent 2 years on a spike above Micklegate Bar, then was carried away for burial, most probably in Holy Trinity Church on Goodramgate. Is Percy, the headless ghost, seen to wander the church's graveyard in search of that buried head? No headless pints at the Anglers' Arms in Goodramgate, though they have ghosts enough. One wafts the scent of lavender across the upstairs rooms. A Victorian girl who ran in play from a pub to be run over by a brewer's dray may still be met on the stairs. In the cellars beneath the trapdoors lurks a more malevolent spirit, turning off the beer taps and releasing its sense of evil. The haunting of the Tudor restaurant on Goodramgate is gentle. The lighting of a lamp, the opening of a door, the tender ghost of Marmaduke Buckle wishing to play. Born a cripple, he carved the dates of his 17-year-old life into the plaster of a wall, then hanged himself from a beam. How often do the visitors to bright and bustling King's Square stop and wonder just where they are walking? This was once the graveyard of the medieval Christ Church, pulled down in 1937. The folk at tea in Betty's look into the ghosts of their reflections in the windows. Who knows what ghosts stare back? The square outside was the graveyard of St. Helen's Church until 1745. Visitors to York soon plunge themselves beneath the pavements to see a Viking York lived well below the level we walk today. The Via Decumana, the main Roman route straight out through the walls and on to the northeast, walked long before the treasurer's house was built. In the 1950s, an apprentice plumber was working in the cellars of the house. He heard a trumpet blast, but worked on, until the figure of a horse emerged through the wall, a tired horse with a man in Roman costume draped across its back. Then soldiers, Roman soldiers with plumed helmets and tunics, shuffling soldiers with round shields and short swords, their heads hanging low. Their garters reached up to their knees, but their feet were invisible. The procession passed. He got up from the earth where he had fallen and ran. He wrote his secret account, fearing madness, then found there were others that shared his sights and sounds. They too never saw the feet of the soldiers and horses, tramping their road through time. Excavations have since shown the Roman road passed some inches below the level of the cellar floor. The young chantry priests of the 15th century Minster had spare time, energy, and money to burn. St. William's College was built to lodge them. It was some haven from the murderous clashes with the men of the town. The tale tells of two priests, both brothers, who robbed and murdered a cleric. The younger one was plagued by guilt. The older, to save himself, denounced his brother to the gallows, and so lived on to pace the corridors of St. William's, haunted by remorse. Footsteps can still be heard walking those ancient boards. Ouse Bridge was packed even back in 1154, townsfolk cheering the return of Archbishop William. The crowd was so great the bridge gave way, collapsing with some 200 people into the flooded Spring River. By a miracle, not one person drowned. Not so lucky were those interned in the Kidcots, prisons built into the replacement bridge. From the top level, hands stretched out to beg from passers-by. Below, in damp-walled cells with no windows, no prisoner could expect to survive long. At the south side was the toll booth, where severed heads could rest before moving up the hill to the spikes above Micklegate Bar. A newspaper report from 1876 speaks of the ghost of Holy Trinity Church on Micklegate. There are 4 divisions in the window. In the middle of the service, my eyes were attracted by a bright light, formed like a female, robed and hooded, passing from north to south, with a rapid gliding motion, outside the church, apparently at some distance. The robe was long and trailed. The legend stretches back to the days of the Black Death. A tragic accident took the husband from a young wife to be laid to rest in Holy Trinity. She turned her love to their infant child, soon snatched from her by a deadly plague. To stop the disease from spreading, victims were carried away for burial beyond the city walls. The mother died of grief, to be laid in the churchyard beside her husband, while her ghost still flies in search of the child. On Micklegate Bar, Thomas Percy's head had noble company through the ages. The head of Richard, Duke of York, mocked with a paper crown, was spiked on a 20-foot pole and set to stare blindly across the city. In the words of Queen Margaret in Shakespeare's Henry VI, "Off with his head and set it on York gates, so York may overlook the town of York." The Knavesmire, site of York's race meetings since 1530, and home to the Tyburn gallows. The last view of highwayman Dick Turpin on the 10th of April 1739. It is in the brave manner of his passing that Turpin won the love of the crowds. He bowed from his cart to the several thousands who lined the route, stamped his right leg to rid it of its trembling, then, with a noose around his neck, threw himself from the ladder. The last days of Dick Turpin's life were spent in the condemned cell of York Debtors' Prison, now part of Castle Museum. The highwayman's body rode on after death, stolen by grave robbers before being retrieved by the mob, and finally laid to rest in the churchyard of St. George's. The Black Swan is a medieval building. Its locals stay loyal through the ages. A young woman turns her face away to stare into the coals of the fire. A man in a bowler hat sits impatiently for several minutes, then dissolves into the air. It's a dark, curly-headed figure that lords it over the cock and bottle. The body of George Villiers, 2nd Duke of Buckingham, may lie in Westminster Abbey, but his reputation was never a noble one. When a cold wave sweeps into his local tavern on Skeldergate, when pictures fall and doors open or lock themselves, the man is back to his mischief. A hazy grey figure ghosts the ancient public house in the shadow of the minster, though more often it turns invisible to throw cutlery about the room, or float bellows down from the ceiling to the floor. Is this the same grey lady that takes centre stage nearby? York's Theatre Royal was built on the site of St. Leonard's Hospital. Psychic researchers investigated the story of a woman bricked alive into its walls. They made contact with Therese, a young nun punished for her claim to have seen angels. She has become an angel of the theatre herself. Her appearance to the actors always promises a successful production. A dance school occupies a site once part of the Church of St. Mary on Bishop Hill Jr., whose tower dates back to the 11th century. History still echoes in the dance hall, where money can be heard pouring onto a table, the coins then chinking one by one into a metal box until the lid is slammed shut. In the 12th century it was forbidden for Christians to lend money at interest, though for the city to expand that job had to be done. It fell to the Jewish community. On the 16th of March 1190, a group of local landowners that owed money to Jewish bankers led an anti-Jewish riot. Some Jews fled for refuge inside the castle, since rebuilt as Clifford's Tower. The rioters surrounded them and laid siege. Sooner than surrender to enforced baptism and probable death, the Jews took their own lives. Nature posted reminders of that bloody day. A red patch appeared on the earthen floor at the foot of the staircase. Just last century, the castle's prison governors had this earth dug up again and again, yet each time this blood-like patch of fungus returned, just as the tower's stone walls are sometimes seen to run red. A more recent event brought the horrors of that massacre keenly to life. A television crew followed the work of Arnold Bloxham and his patients under hypnotism who recalled earlier lives. A Welsh lady relived her flight as Rebecca, separated from the other Jews and fleeing into the crypt of a York church, where she was found and slain. The details she gave were vivid and accurate. The church matched the church of St. Mary's on Castlegate, except it had no such crypt. It was months later that a workman in the chancel of St. Mary's dislodged some bricks and looked through the hole into the vaulted crypt she had described. The Shambles, formerly the street of butchers' shops. Margaret Clitheroe was the wife of a 16th century butcher. She converted to Catholicism and hid priests from persecution, till she was denounced. A door was laid upon her, then weight after weight upon the door, in an attempt to make her forswear her faith. She never did. The life was crushed from her. Her home is now a shrine, a place of peace in a busy world. A radiant ghost, her cheeks flushed with life, her hair a tumble of dressed curls, once graced the graveyard of All Saints' Church on Pavement. Shrouded in white, she was drawn towards funerals welcoming the procession into the church. The church's sanctuary spread as far as the door. Folk only had to grasp the ring of the door knocker to be safe. Safe at least from the law, if not from the spirits of York's past.